Oh,
Disney
yeah.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah,
What book?
really nice.
Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, great stuff, and there's so much funny stuff
Yeah.
in it too.
I
love
still
the Red
most
Queen.
of those. Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
you know, my Becky Baby
best
Whacker.
personality. Yeah.
Oh, my Becky Baby Whacker. And but then I got to love the White Queen
Mhm.
because she's so funny,
Yeah.
walking around like this all the time, and that's what's her name. She's a terrific actress, actor, huh?
I was gonna say, see, I actually haven't seen.
Christina Ricci.
Is
Is it?
no,
Anyway.
No.
Helena Bowman Carter.
Oh yeah,
No.
Helena. Yeah, it's Helena Bonham Carter. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the
Yeah.
Red Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, she's great, and she's with Johnny Depp in about 10 or 12 movies together.
Yeah. See, actually,
she's
I thought
always
you were.
been
I
good.
haven't seen the real life one. I've only seen the Disney version.
Oh,
I've not
Oh,
yet.
yeah.
Yeah, I've not yet watched the.
these are so
I'm
much.
behind the
They're
times.
so
I didn't see that.
funny.
Is there a second one? There's a second
They've
one.
made
right?
a.
Yeah,
bunch
they
of
did. They
sequels
did
now.
2 of them.
Yeah.
The Return.
Right.
And
Yeah, I never saw the second.
it's nice. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But
It did. Is it a Who's the producer that is always working with?
Tim Burton.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think so.
What is it? A Tim Burton?
I think so.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think so.
you're right. So
It's
you
got
know
that-
it's
Johnny
Let's
Depp
get that.
is in
that
it.
what's the right
vibe.
word?
Yeah.
It's macabre.
Macabre.
In it, but
Yeah.
it's within the boundaries of that fairy tale.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question
Sure.
so that we can go to where I think you'd like to go with me. What makes that kind of genre so appealing to so many people? Not only kids, lots and lots of adults. What makes it so appealing? I mean, what's the fundamental reason it's so appealing?
I think it's similar to like Peter Pan, where it's this sort of you can
Yes.
enter into nonsense and childhood and that sort of
Magic and
nostalgic
possibility.
that nostalgic place that you have as a kid that I think
Right.
as adults, you know, you look at kids and you're like, God, I want to be that free. And so I think
Right. And you want to be that radiant too, in the way they move and all that.
possibility, just
Yeah.
that idea of
Endless childhood.
I feel like I'm saying Charlie and the Chocolate Factory now. That
Yeah.
too, though.
Yep. No, the same thing.
The
Same.
world of endless imagination, or something. What that song is.
Pure imagination. Yeah.
Yep.
All those kids' movies. It's that idea. Chronicles of Narnia.
These things are works of art. They are truly works of art. Some are more esoteric than others, probably, but all of that is a work of art, and it comes from an appeal to the innocent childhood that we started with, and then some of us
Or
become
creep.
absolute monsters, right? But you'll find the desire for myth and magic in many people, and you know what that means. That means that emotionally, that is being appealed to at the emotional level between 6 and 9 years old. Maybe 10 if you're really stuck,
Yeah.
but that's when you believe in magical stuff. You can. And so a lot of my characters in my books wind up that way because they're so easily led. In Narcissus and the Vampire Myth, all those followers were authoritarian personalities. Those are authoritarian personalities. That's one of the characteristics. The other, as I've told you, the authoritarian personality, according to me, my doctrine, every time you see one who's an authoritarian personality, he's also a narcissist. Like all those little Saddam Husseins that used to sit around the table with Saddam, and they all look like the same guy. They all look like him as much as they possibly could. I mean, really, it was almost like a cartoon.
And so, what in those personalities do you think causes that like ability to just follow these people that are so easily led?
Very good question. What is the reason that it's fear, it's lack of self-esteem, it's a need to be told what is right and wrong because you're so confused? Can you imagine? There's a conversation that took place the last time I ever attended one of those sessions up in Massachusetts where a guy who had read 5 or 6 books in his life thought he was like a great philosopher. And he was making mistakes that were cured 2,500 years ago by Socrates, or disproved. And so there was the question about how all morality, somebody said, let's talk about morality. So he said, nobody here would disagree that all morality comes out of authority. And so I just cut them apart for the next hour. I just took them from one corner to the next corner, to the next corner, to the next corner, to the next corner. and showed that he was totally wrong. And like the first thing I said, you mean I need an authority to tell me that that guy Davis, who kidnapped and raped and murdered little Polly Klaas, is like, what, 6, 7, 8 years old? I need an authority to teach me that that's wrong. A baby will scream if it sees another baby being harmed. If I'm alive, if I'm not so drunk or drugged on some ideology, I don't need anybody to tell me that that's wrong at any stage of my life. I always knew as a child. Every child knows. Every child will, unless you're born with some kind of terrible karma, and who in an opposition to this point would talk about karma, spiritual stuff. Here's the basic fact. Ashley Montagu would tell you this in spades, a beautifully written material, all about the love of the body. Basically in the 60s I learned about Love's Body. There are books like this. There was an awakening to the basic physicality of one's life, and that is a spiritual center. But it gets distorted. We can't help it, the conditions of the world. We turn into what? The big problem. Selfish beings. And some people are pathologically selfish. I see that all around me. I just had an episode with my mechanic who for the next 5 weeks never worked on my car because he didn't want to take the time because he owed me the work. And so he'd rather work on things that made him money. Just a pathologic, he just threw away the whole relationship. I'll never go to him for anything. Or maybe I'll stop in just to get oil changes in the morning. But he'll never see my cars for work again. But that doesn't matter because people are so self-enclosed. It's the heart of that child that we're talking about that would be open. And one of the parts of the fairy tale is that there's a true goodness there. But if you study the things that I've looked at, I haven't studied them in the sense that other people have where they can remember all the names and stuff like that. But I do understand the essence of it, and I look at things like Manichaeanism. And it's basically a theory that the entire world is evil. And you can say that because of ego. The fundamental problem. I mean, in the West, they talk about the devil. In the East, they know the devil is the self, the small self, as opposed to the universal self or the oversoul. But we all have the oversoul. We are all the Atman. We are all that son of God, that I called it, you know. And what is that? It's just simply, to me, see, you could be a moronic atheist if you want, but to me, that higher self, which is evident in some people experience that. They experience the white light. They become dissolved. I've seen the eye seeing me. I don't claim to be enlightened as a result of it, but I know that I can't close the eyes to this consciousness.
Right, you're constantly in connection to the consciousness,
Probably not constantly, but very, I mean...
No, you're right. It's not constant, but I keep going back to it.
Right.
And under certain meditative
Present.
conditions, it's easier to go back. Or in the proper dialogue with people. See, here we are discussing it. And to me, this is the beginning of what Christianity would be really about. They said when you invoke my name with 2 or more of you, then I am with you. What does that mean? Is that just some kind of metaphor? Is that a little poetry? No, it isn't. He knows that he is. You know, unless he's lying and a crazy man. Okay? But there's this possibility that he knew, as Alan Watts said, he knew he was cosmic consciousness. As a whole array of thinkers and mystics would tell you, that being is the pure light of the void.
Meaning unfiltered cosmic consciousness, just constant.
Pure happiness.
Right.
Pure happiness. No, I mean, think of
the entire state of one's existence does not ever flow from or interchange from that.
That's an interesting point, because maybe it does ebb and flow. It seems to come out of itself and go into these ego states where we're
Right.
characterized by a fundamental anxiety.
Mm.
I mean, look at the basis of your anxiety. It's a fear, right? What is it that you fear so much? Many, many times, especially at your ages, you puppies and kittens, you I have
Not
a right
so
to speak
much.
that way. I'm that old. I can. But at your age, let me slow down. It manifests in different versions of freedom, and it should. But there's like a lack of this. I don't want to say it's lack of the spiritual, but it's the lack of the communion. And I've suggested to you guys, your place is great. You have some people, those people that you know, invite them over. Give them a glass, give them a cup of coffee or a spritzy water or something, and some peanuts, and just hang out with them for a couple of hours. That's all. Just, hey, you want to hang out? Extend yourself. I used to have people 14, 15 people deep in my house. Not that long ago, really. Yeah. It can be fun. It does things. It connections for young people with
Well,
all
and
your.
the energy we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
when you first come in, it does definitely, if it's good energy that's being
Exactly.
brought in,
You
it
could be-
really can elevate.
It was fun during the
Space.
60s.
Yeah.
It was fun just huddling together with like-minded people.
Mhm.
You never realized how lonely you were until you started hanging around with
Mhm.
people that dispelled it for a while.
Mm.
And those are the people like you two guys. You do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you know how I see you. Did he tell you?
Mm-mm.
I have vision of both of you, right? Werewolf, cat, a cougar, a cougar.
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I see that.
I was I was up on La Cumbra one night with a friend. I had taught him back in Johnston. I was out in California, in Santa Barbara, and he always stayed in touch with me all these many years. And he's probably in his 60s by now. And I was out there, and he took me. He's very successful in his cleaning business, and so he drives one of his Corvette. We go up La Cumbra, and we stop at a certain point. He shows me where he's been rock climbing. He's a very athletic kid, good kid. And then while we're standing there, we heard this scream come from this side where the top of the mountain is. And we thought, actually, we didn't know it came. No, I'm sorry, it didn't come from that side. It came from down below. I'm sorry. It came from down below, and we had driven past a group of young people who were down there. And we thought, oh, there's something bad going on. So we jumped in the car and drove down. They were all gone. And then we got out of the car and we stood down there waiting. And then we heard it scream again. And then after a little while, up at the top, there was another scream. Isn't that nice? They were getting together for the evening. Fierce creatures, beautiful. And there you are in Santa Barbara. I love Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And La Cumbra, the mountain, is like to me sacred. It was like because there are certain places that are so beautiful that they kind of evoke that childhood in us.
Yeah. I
we
felt
see.
that in Joshua Tree down in Southern California, the national park out there. It's so,
Really.
yeah, it's like another planet because it's desert, but it has, I mean, the Joshua trees are these crazy sort of spiky plant, like they're cactuses.
Where is it?
It's,
in the Los Angeles area?
It's a little bit farther southeast. It's like
It's inland.
Palm Springs, Yucca Valley would be where
Okay.
you'd like fly into, and
Oh,
then it's just south of Yucca Valley. It's phenomenal. It's if you go north, that's I believe. Sorry, you hit oh my gosh, what's the major desert out there? Death Valley
Mojave?
National Park out
Mojave?
there. Yeah, and the Mojave's right north of it as well.
Is that the Mojave?
That whole area. So Gene and I drove through the Mojave during we thought we were going to be national heroes. It rained the entire time we drove through California. This was 2 years ago. They had this major
Really?
drought. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had thunderstorms throughout the Mojave Desert, and it would go between actual rain and then just heat storms because it was 90 something degrees
That's
at
awesome.
8 p.m. at night.
Yeah.
And it was the most otherworldly experience I had
Yeah.
like ever had. I felt like I was on Mars
Yeah.
with these big
The
cacti.
heat stuff. Yeah.
That was
That's awesome.
one of the craziest places I've ever been.
I've never been down there.
Yeah.
That sounds very nice.
It's very, very cool. The whole west and then like southwest has like really. I never thought I'd be interested in it, but it's blown me away. It makes sense as an artist though, because the colors and the forms.
Yeah.
And the space. We don't have space like that in the Northeast.
It does
Yeah.
something to your mind.
Definitely.
You
Definitely.
It
have
opens
trees
you. I was just
always.
gonna say,
The beach
changes
is the only
definitely.
thing we have, the ocean and the beach.
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
you're still surrounded on one side.
To go off on that subject a little bit, I've definitely come to understand the accelerated rate of living in the city. Like it is just going
After being in
so.
New York.
Well, that's an extreme version of what we experience
We're back
here,
there.
though.
Just
But,
Providence.
but just in general,
Trademark.
think about in even in Situate or in
Excellent.
Exeter, you're pushed out so far that there's just you have space between things. So literally it takes time to get from one place to another, and that time allows you a chance to be by yourself.
Introspection.
And it gives you like some semblance of like your existence. But when
You're
you're
so
in the
alone
city,
a lot more often.
you are a cog in a machine
Yeah.
that is moving incredibly fast.
Drive out there and you know exactly what you're saying.
I've told you that this experience I faced where I've actually felt more alone in a sense being in the city where like if you think about when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you come across another person, you are the sole focus and
Yeah.
attention. Like it is only you and you are it's your show, good and bad. Whereas in the city, you just blend in with the millions of other people. There's what 8 million, 9 million people in New York City and like 30 square miles or something.
Right.
Not even. And so it's like you have this capability. You blend in so much, like, and there's always going to be someone louder, weirder, crazier, whatever than you. And there's this sort of peace with that where you can really just exist and not worry. That I've not felt out here in Rhode Island.
That's interesting.
You go somewhere, everyone knows you. They know your stories. It's and I get why some people like that, the small town charm. Everyone knows you. You have, you go in somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
As an
I think
introvert, that scares the crap out of
But-
me.
really? So-
But that, not everybody, nobody knows me. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Modern society, if you read people like Eric Fromm, like that, going back to the 60s and 70s, alienated man. I mean, read Sartre, you find out the foundation of alienation. It's found right in the core of consciousness, where he describes it as a nothingness that's always in need and lack. And it's always gobbling up the next phenomenon and tearing away. Recul nihilison. The annihilating recoil that we experience from moment to moment to moment to moment. And that's a symbol of our restlessness, and the restlessness comes from the lack of some profound realization that we are okay. Because we don't, I'm going to say it, in this level of self-division where the people talk about mind and body, it's a mind-body.
Right.
At that level, you have to be self-divided, and if you're self-divided, you're living in this bubble on the ocean, and it makes you know that, first of all, other bubbles have been popping. I look, 34 of my teachers that I taught with have already died since I last saw them. You know that's coming, and if you claim that it doesn't bother you, you're bullshitting yourself terribly. The end of the ego, Taylor Caldwell did it symbolically in her book, Dialogues with the Devil, I think it was, and she had one guy in hell, and they were talking about things. You get so bored. Hell is like, oh, everything is great, everything is perfect. And so you go from one perfect thing to another, but you don't go to it with a perfect mind. You go with that mind that you took to your death, and then after a while you get so bored you go to the torture chambers every day on purpose.
Mm.
Just amazing stuff, brilliant.
Well,
And it's basically a testimonial to the fact that we are, by this nature, never fulfilled with any condition.
Mhm.
It's not the condition, it's the condition of the mind in relationship to the conditions. And it's hard to be transcendental.
well, I mean, it's in the nature of this level of existence. It would seem that in order for someone, an organism, to survive, it has to want to survive, and so that in and of itself binds you in some way to the way that you act upon or the way that one would act in this level of existence. Unless you're just going to like be born and sit under a tree your entire life until you die.
Yeah,
You know, you have to move in
Yeah.
some way, and so you're propelled to stay in existence. That certainly must have momentum.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm being bullied by
Yeah.
this enfant terrible,
Um,
terrible dog.
so you were
She
saying
needs attention now.
you were saying. By the way, as an aside, breaking the fourth wall, camera audience. It's bad to put animals in shots because you definitely pay attention to the animal way more than
Absolutely, I
anything that
would.
we're saying.
I would.
Yeah.
Everybody does. That's why people don't want to be shot with animals,
Yeah,
dogs.
Right. You,
Of course.
you
This
scared
whole
one
video, people are just watching. Right?
One
Exactly.
person I shared a video with, you scared them because they didn't realize you had a dog on you.
Oh,
First they said it was a cat. It doesn't even
well,
look
it's
like
kind of a cat. It's a Chihuahua, so
Yeah.
it's,
This-
it
They're
this is
usually,
Lucy,
interchangeable.
by the way.
yeah.
Lucy the Chihuahua.
They act just like cats.
What was I gonna say? So you're talking about the level of consciousness where you're at uninterrupted consciousness. I guess what one would call pure enlightenment, and then in what way could you show the layers of filtration that would create the being that experiences such self-absorption, such narcissism? So let's say you start with a pure light being, and then there's a layer of this level of identity and that level of identity, and just further. There's so many
It's a
chains,
ball too.
right?
It's like within balls, but it's circles within circles. I used to call them concentric circles. But I was in reference to self in relationship to others, so that I could get a moral base.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that which is closest to the center, your mother, your father, your dog, your girlfriend, you know. So the closer that person is, the more you are identified with that one, and therefore you want no pain to come to that one because that would pain you. You've not transcended the self, you simply expanded it.
Mm-hmm.
Now some people try to expand it to all the other circles, but the fact is that I maintain that there are concentric circles, and the farther out on one of the circles you go, the less essential you are to the life of the center. So that you may regret hearing about people being shot, but you don't even know their names.
Right.
It's just its story
Right.
that goes on, and so it's not existentially personal to you. I wanted to get into a discussion of existential.
Really quickly before you go into that, you're saying that the circles that overlap in terms of someone's identity overlapping with another being's identity would, if you can identify enough with that other being, you break down boundaries like between.
You could be the kind of a person who could have a number of boundaries that are weakened, are faded, perforated, so that there are beings that pour through. Where somebody from the outer circle, if you got to know that person, could pour right through into the center.
Mm-hmm.
because some people are just dedicated to a higher state of being, but they identify it with goodness, they identify it with love, they identify it with a relationship. They understand that some people that don't know the philosophy that I do, and all the technical readings, et cetera, but they don't have to know that for their own lives, because they know that without love, this world is really meaningless. And so is their religion. Some of them are religious, some of them are not. But they find it's in the spirit, and the spirit is what? The spirit is not limited to one being. The spirit is individual in everybody. It's totally undivided, and yet it is in all these divisions. It lives its life like that. I'm implying that it's aware of itself. I'm absolutely sure that it becomes aware of itself when a mystic achieves it. It's aware of itself then. The mystic knows it's not a who he is, it's what he is, or she. There's so much to say about this, so many talks and dialogues with people. I was in a Gurdjieff group once, and unfortunately there wasn't a lot of real understanding. And one woman who had just been brought in because she was the newest girlfriend of one of the members used to use the club for a Saturday night date night where you get free cheese and wine and well, goodies at the end of the night, and he'd take his girlfriend, and he was pretending that he was doing spiritual work. Well, she said, I don't know who I am. Now she's learning about Gurdjieff and the higher states of consciousness, or the awakening. That's what it's all about, awakening. I don't know who. And I wanted to tell her, it's not who you are, it's what you are. You're not another, that's the homunculus, the little man inside your head who got a little man inside his head, who also on and on into infinitum.
Basically just trying to identify with another level of things, which is like a complete projection of a spiritual contest, right?
Yeah, but it's also a complete projection of this self.
Yeah.
Like people think they're going to go, well, good, if you're going to go to another place that's really nice, then read my book, Mickey and the Green Head in Heaven, because I made that a heaven for these people.
Right.
And some of them were pretty terrible people, but they got in anyway.
Right.
And then they walk around, and it's all full of stuff that comes from their own life, and it gets to be really funny, and because that's one of the main characters is the little green head that grows out of the shoulder of Ray Capoverde. Capoverde means green head in Italian. So, I mean, you can have fun with it. I did, but I think people get caught up in the fact that I'm just a crazy storyteller. Because it's all about Jungian shadow. It's acknowledged right in the first chapter when this Ray Capoverde is introducing the book, and he's talking about how he woke up one morning after a terrible night of nightmares, where all these selves are trying to resolve a conflict, and in the morning there they were, this little green head, nasty, spit in his ear, do all kinds of really inappropriate. And it's to the point where he actually convinced him to do something that led to the murder of 3 people. His best friend, Mickey Thorson, the Mickey Mantle type of guy. I've had him at the Mickey Mantle, only without injury, and therefore 800 home runs, that kind of guy. And then he hooks up with this beautiful Aphrodite, but he's married first of all to Minerva, who was one of the goddesses. She's a ferocious warrior. She's Athena, and so anyway. So I put all these mythological people all together, including Cassandra, the prophetess that came out of Troy and warned everybody about what was going to happen, and nobody believed her. Well, there's a scene in there like that between her and Ray Capoverde, the idiot. So it's a fun book, and it's obviously what you call a black comedy, because there are 3 murders, but then everybody's together in heaven, and they're still working stuff out. There's Mickey. Can I tell you about Mickey? Can I tell an off-colored story about Mickey? Mickey was very handsome, but he never cheated on his wife, and then he met this spectacular beauty, and they seduced each other, just fell in love with each other, two perfect beings. He was just retired, and she's like the best tennis player in the world. Nobody does anything against her. She's the silver leopard and stuff like that. And she's spectacular. They get together, and Minerva, who's the sweetest thing in the world, beautiful, like the most beautiful woman in the world when she was 20. And then she married him. They're together all these years. Never cheats, and they got these spectacular kids. 5. I think they gave him 5 kids. They're all spectacular. A couple of them are going to be baseball players. Are going to be great too. And they're watching them one day as they're playing. They're like a couple of teenagers and stuff like that, and watching them play. They're in Newport in some mansion overlooking this giant back lawn while the kids are playing some kind of games out there, and they're on the balcony talking, and they're just enthralled with this wonderful family. But Mickey now has nothing to do, so he's itchy. He's not playing ball anymore, but he's itchy. He's fabulously wealthy. He's worth $500 million, and they're being put up as friendly guests by this billionaire. Here, come live in my house for the summer. They're just, the world is open to them. And Minnie says to him, "If you ever cheat on me," this is completely out of character. "If you ever cheat on me, I promise that I'll cut your heart out and I'll roast it in front of the children." And then she runs inside, and she's like mortified that this came out of her, and he's trying to console her, but he's stunned. He never saw this in all the years. This book is all about shadow, and so Mickey cheated on her, and I won't tell the whole story. I'd like people to read it someday. Maybe we should get it. I know it probably could use editing, but I like to just get it out there. People would have so much fun reading it. A few people read it, and they thought it was pretty funny.
Sure. Yep. We got to throw it on Amazon.
Well, let's do it.
Yep.
Because I
need
always
a cover
thought
for it.
I was going to do.
I did the old cover for it, but it needs to be updated.
I was going to do Narcissus and the Vampire Myth, but I thought I'd do a funny one first because I had just finished the allegories.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, my good friend John Rice, Professor Emeritus of Engineering at UMass, has read everything of mine except my very first work, and he's been reading, and I'll see him probably this Saturday. He's been reading the allegories. Very close towards the end when I get.
That's what I want to get up more than anything.
Yeah, they're not for everybody. That's the fact, But I think I always said that if people read my other books first, they're more adventurous, etc. Characterization, there's so much to it. They would probably like to read those. Certain serious-minded people would.
Yeah.